Chapter 1. The Soldier's Return. Derek Holden had survived 18 months in places most people couldn't find on a map. He'd been a combat medic with the 75th Ranger Regiment, pulling wounded soldiers from firefights in the mountains of Afghanistan. The kind of work that aged you in ways that had nothing to do with years. At 34, he had the eyes of someone much older, sharp, measuring, missing nothing. But tonight, driving through the familiar streets of his hometown in Oregon, he felt almost young again, almost hopeful. The divorce papers had been finalized 6 months into his deployment. Shelby Holden, now back to her maiden name, Forbes, had sent them via email with a lawyer's letter attached. No phone call. No explanation beyond the clinical language of irreconcilable differences. They'd been married for 8 years. Their son, Billy, was 7 years old. Derek hadn't fought it. He'd signed the papers from a base in Kandahar, sent them back, and tried to focus on keeping his squad alive. The marriage had been dying slowly anyway, suffocated by his deployments and Shelby's resentment. She'd wanted stability, a husband who came home every night. He'd wanted to serve, to do something that mattered. Neither of them was wrong. They were just incompatible. What gutted him was Billy. Through sporadic video calls and messages, Derek had watched his son grow quieter, more withdrawn. Billy had always been a bright kid, curious, funny, with his mother's green eyes and his father's stubborn jaw. But in recent months, something had changed. The light in those eyes had dimmed. Billy's answers became monosyllabic. He'd flinch at loud noises during their calls. Derek had asked Shelby about it. She'd been dismissive. He's fine. He's adjusting. Kids are resilient. But Derek knew trauma. He'd seen it in the faces of civilians caught in war zones, in the 1,000-yard stares of soldiers who'd seen too much. And he'd started seeing it in his 7-year-old son. So he'd called in every favor he had, pulled strings, made promises, and gotten himself rotated stateside 2 months early with an honorable discharge and a clean slate. He'd texted Shelby that he was coming back, that he wanted to establish a custody arrangement, be present in Billy's life. She'd responded with a curt, "We'll figure it out. Don't just show up unannounced." Naturally, Derek was showing up unannounced. His old pickup truck, stored at his brother's place during deployment, rumbled down Maple Street. The house he'd once called home looked the same from the outside. A modest 2-story with blue siding and white trim, a maple tree in the front yard that Billy used to climb. Shelby's car was in the driveway. Next to it sat a black Dodge Charger with custom rims and tinted windows. Loud, aggressive, compensating for something. Derek's jaw tightened. So there was someone new. That was fine. He wasn't here to win Shelby back. He was here for Billy. He parked across the street, grabbed the duffel bag from his passenger seat, and walked up to the door. It was 6:47 p.m. on a Friday. Through the windows, he could see lights on inside. He could hear music, something with heavy bass that rattled the windows. He rang the doorbell. The music cut off abruptly. Footsteps. The door swung open, and Derek found himself face to face with a man he'd never seen before. Malcolm Parsons was in his late 30s, built like someone who spent serious time in the gym, not for health, but for intimidation. Broad shoulders, thick neck, arms covered in sleeve tattoos of skulls and flames. His hair was slicked back, and he wore a tight black t-shirt that showed off his physique. Gold chains, a smirk that made Derek's trigger finger itch. "Yeah," Malcolm said, looking Derek up and down with barely concealed contempt. "I'm Derek, Billy's father. I'm here to see my son." Malcolm's smirk widened. "Shelby didn't mention you were coming by. I didn't ask permission." "That's so." Malcolm leaned against the doorframe, blocking the entrance. "Well, this ain't your house anymore, soldier boy. Maybe you should call first next time." Derek's expression didn't change, but his eyes went flat and cold. In Afghanistan, he'd learned to read people quickly. Who was scared, who was dangerous, who was all talk. Malcolm was a bully. The kind who felt big when he had the advantage, but would fold under real pressure. Still, Derek wasn't here to start a fight. Not yet. "Look," Derek said, his voice level. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to see Billy. 5 minutes. Then I'll go." "He's busy." "Busy doing what?" "He's 7. Busy. What part of that don't you understand?" Before Derek could respond, Shelby appeared behind Malcolm. She'd changed in the 18 months since he'd last seen her in person. Thinner, harder somehow. Her blonde hair was darker, cut short. She wore too much makeup, and her eyes held a defensive wariness that made Derek sad for reasons he couldn't quite articulate. "Derek," she said, her voice tight. "What are you doing here? I told you I was coming back. I want to see Billy. You said you'd call when you got back. You can't just show up like this." "Why not? I'm his father. And I have custody," Shelby shot back. "The court gave me primary custody. You get him on weekends, supervised visits until—" "Supervised?" Derek interrupted. "I've never hurt Billy in my life. You abandoned him for 18 months. I was deployed. There's a difference." Malcolm put his arm around Shelby possessively. "I think you should leave, man. You're upsetting her." Derek ignored him, keeping his focus on Shelby. "I just want to see him. Please, Shelby. I've been gone a long time. I miss him." Something flickered in Shelby's eyes. Guilt, maybe, or exhaustion. She sighed. "Fine. 5 minutes. But then you leave, and we do this properly through lawyers." "Understood." Derek nodded. Shelby turned and called up the stairs. "Billy, come down here." Silence. "Billy," she called again, louder this time. Still nothing. Malcolm muttered something under his breath and pushed past Shelby, heading for the stairs. "I'll get the little brat." Derek's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Not yet," he told himself. "Get Billy alone. Find out what's going on." Chapter 2. The Truth in Whispers. Malcolm thundered up the stairs, and Derek heard a door open. Muffled voices, Malcolm's aggressive bark, and something quieter, more frightened. Derek's chest tightened. A moment later, Billy appeared at the top of the stairs. Derek's breath caught in his throat. His son looked small. That was the first thing that hit him. Billy had always been a sturdy kid, solid for his age. But now he looked fragile, almost gaunt. He wore a long-sleeved shirt despite the warm September evening, and sweatpants. His dark hair was longer, unkempt. And his eyes, those bright, curious green eyes, were shadowed with something Derek recognized all too well. Fear. Billy descended the stairs slowly, carefully, like every step hurt. When he reached the bottom, he didn't run to Derek the way he used to. He just stood there, staring at the floor. "Hey, buddy," Derek said softly, crouching down to Billy's level. "It's so good to see you." Billy's eyes flicked up briefly, meeting his father's gaze. For just a second, Derek saw relief there, pure, desperate relief. But it vanished quickly, replaced by that flat, shuttered expression. "Hi, Dad," Billy whispered. Derek reached out to hug him, and Billy flinched. It was subtle, a slight tensing of his shoulders, a barely perceptible lean away. But Derek caught it. He'd spent years treating trauma victims. He knew the signs. He pulled Billy into a gentle hug anyway, and the boy's body was rigid against him. Derek could feel him trembling. "I've missed you so much," Derek murmured. "Are you okay?" Billy didn't answer. Behind him, Malcolm stood at the base of the stairs, arms crossed, watching. Shelby had retreated to the kitchen. Derek pulled back, keeping his hands on Billy's shoulders. "Can we talk? Just you and me? Maybe outside." "He's got homework," Malcolm said flatly. 5 minutes, remember?" Derek's jaw clenched, but he nodded. He looked back at Billy. "How about we sit on the porch? Just for a minute?" Billy glanced nervously at Malcolm, then nodded quickly. They stepped outside onto the front porch, and Derek closed the door behind them. Through the window, he could see Malcolm watching, his face dark with suspicion. But at least they had a moment of relative privacy. Derek sat down on the porch steps, patting the space beside him. Billy sat, but kept a careful distance. His movements were stiff, controlled, like someone trying not to aggravate an injury. "Billy," Derek said gently, "talk to me. What's going on?" "Nothing. Buddy, I can see something's wrong. You can tell me. Whatever it is, I promise I'll help." Billy's lower lip trembled. His hands twisted in his lap. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a voice so quiet Derek had to lean in to hear, he whispered, "Mom said you wouldn't come back. She said you didn't care about us anymore." Derek's heart cracked. "That's not true. I'll always care about you. Always. I'm sorry I was gone so long, but I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere." Billy's eyes filled with tears. "Promise. I promise." And that's when it happened. Billy suddenly lurched forward, wrapping his arms around Derek's waist and burying his face in his father's chest. A sob tore out of him, raw, desperate, terrified. "Dad," he gasped. "Dad, please don't leave me here." Derek held him tight, his mind racing. "What's wrong?" "Billy, what happened?" "He hurts me," Billy choked out. Malcolm. He gets mad, and The front door opened. Malcolm stood there, his expression dark. Time's up. Give us a minute, Derek said, his voice hard as stone. I said time's up. Malcolm stepped onto the porch. Billy, get inside. Billy's grip on Derek tightened. Please, Dad. Now, Billy. Malcolm's voice cracked like a whip, and Billy flinched so violently that Derek felt it in his own bones. Derek stood slowly, putting himself between Malcolm and his son. He's talking to me. Back off. Malcolm took a step closer, his chest puffed out. Up close, Derek could smell beer on his breath. This is my house. You don't give orders here. Your house. Derek's voice was dangerously quiet. My name's still on the mortgage. I've been paying half of it every month, even while I was deployed. So don't tell me about your house. Malcolm's face reddened. You think you're tough because you played soldier? I don't give a. Billy. Shelby's voice came from inside, sharp and commanding. Get in here. Now. Billy hesitated, looking up at his father with terrified, pleading eyes. Derek wanted to grab him, throw him in the truck, and drive away. But he couldn't. Not legally. Not without making things worse. It's okay, Derek said softly, cupping Billy's face. Go inside. I'll be back tomorrow, okay? We'll figure this out. Billy nodded miserably and slipped past Malcolm into the house. Derek straightened to his full height, 6'2" of muscle and coiled violence. He looked Malcolm dead in the eye. If you've hurt my son. What? Malcolm sneered. What are you gonna do? You're nothing. Shelby told me all about you. A pathetic coward who ran away to play hero while she was here alone. You got no rights here anymore. Derek's fist clenched, but he forced himself to breathe. To think. Losing his temper now would only hurt Billy. Stay away from my son, he said quietly. Or what? Derek smiled. A cold, predatory thing that made Malcolm's bravado falter for just a second. You really want to find out? He turned and walked back to his truck, feeling Malcolm's eyes on his back the entire way. As he drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Billy was standing at his bedroom window, small and alone, watching him leave. Derek's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. I'm coming back for you, Billy. I promise. Chapter 3, Gathering Evidence. Derek drove to his brother's place on the outskirts of town. Art Holden was 2 years younger, a mechanic who ran his own garage. He'd been the one to store Derek's truck and belongings while he was deployed, and he'd been sending occasional updates about life back home, though he'd never mentioned anything about Shelby's new boyfriend. Art was under the hood of a '67 Mustang when Derek pulled up. He straightened, wiping his hands on a rag, and grinned. Well, look what the army coughed up. You're back early. Yeah. Derek climbed out of the truck. We need to talk. Art's grin faded when he saw his brother's expression. What's wrong? Billy. They went inside Art's small house, a bachelor pad that smelled like motor oil and old pizza. Derek paced the living room while Art grabbed 2 beers from the fridge. Derek waved his off. He needed to think clearly. Talk to me, Art said, settling into a worn armchair. Derek told him everything. The homecoming, Malcolm, Billy's behavior, the flinching, the desperate plea. Something's wrong. Really wrong. And I need to know what I'm dealing with. Art's expression darkened. You think this Malcolm guy is hitting him? I think it's worse than that. Billy's terrified. And Shelby's either oblivious or complicit. Jesus. Art rubbed his face. What are you going to do? I need information first. I need to know who Malcolm Parsons is. Where he came from. What he's capable of. Derek looked at his brother. You still tight with Clarence at the sheriff's department? Art nodded slowly. Clarence Jimenez was a deputy sheriff who'd gone to high school with the Holden brothers. Good guy. Straight shooter. Think he'd run a background check off the books? For you? And for Billy. Art stood up. Let me make a call. An hour later, they were sitting in a booth at Murphy's Diner on Route 9, across from Clarence Jimenez. The deputy was in his mid-30s, fit, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He slid a manila folder across the table to Derek. Malcolm Parsons, Clarence said quietly. 38 years old. Born in Reno. Moved here 6 months ago. He paused. He's got a record. Derek opened the folder. Inside were police reports, booking photos, restraining orders. His blood ran cold as he read. 2 domestic violence arrests in Nevada, Clarence continued. Both charges dropped. Victims recanted their statements. Assault and battery in California. Served 18 months. Another domestic incident in Idaho also dropped. He met Derek's eyes. This guy's a predator, Derek. He finds vulnerable women and moves in. Gets violent. Then the victims get scared and the charges disappear. Why the hell is he around my son? Derek's voice shook with controlled rage. Shelby probably has no idea. These guys are good at hiding their history. Charming at first. Then the mask comes off. Clarence leaned forward. Look, man, I'll be straight with you. If you've got evidence that he's hurting Billy, we can move on this. But suspicion isn't enough. We need proof. What kind of proof? Photos of injuries. A statement from Billy. Medical records. Something concrete. Derek thought about Billy's long sleeves. The flinching. The terror in his eyes. He's covering something up. I know it. Then you need to get him to show you. Or to tell you directly. Clarence hesitated. And Derek? Be careful. If Parsons is as dangerous as his record suggests, confronting him directly could get messy. Could make things worse for Billy. So what am I supposed to do? Just leave my son there. No. Clarence's voice was firm. You document everything. You build a case. You do this right. So when we move on him, it sticks. No loopholes. No dropped charges. He stood up, leaving the folder on the table. I'm on shift tomorrow night. If something happens, you call me first. Understand? Derek nodded. Thank you. After Clarence left, Derek sat in the booth, staring at the folder. At the booking photos of Malcolm Parsons, smirking at the camera like he knew he'd get away with it. What's the play? Art asked quietly. I'm going back tomorrow, Derek said. I'm getting Billy alone, and I'm getting him to show me what's going on. Then I'm taking photos. Building evidence. His eyes hardened. And then I'm going to end this. End it how? Derek looked at his brother. However I have to. The next morning, Derek parked down the street from the house and waited. He watched Shelby leave for work at 8:15 a.m. She'd taken a job at a real estate office downtown. Malcolm's Charger was still in the driveway. At 9:30, Malcolm emerged, dressed in gym clothes. He climbed into his car and drove off, heading toward the CrossFit gym on 5th Street. Derek had already checked the gym's schedule online. Malcolm had posted about his morning workouts on social media, every Saturday, 10 a.m. to noon. Predictable. Stupid. Derek waited 10 minutes to make sure Malcolm wasn't coming back, then approached the house. He tried the front door, locked. He went around back. The kitchen window was open a crack, the same one that had never latched properly. Some things never changed. He slipped inside quietly. Billy, he called softly. It's Dad. Where are you? Silence. Then, from upstairs, Dad. Derek took the stairs 2 at a time. Billy's bedroom door was ajar. Inside, his son sat on the bed, still in his pajamas. Relief flooded his face when he saw Derek, but it was mixed with fear. Where's Malcolm? Jim. We've got maybe 2 hours. Derek sat on the edge of the bed. Billy, I need you to be brave for me, okay? I need you to tell me the truth. Has Malcolm hurt you? Billy's eyes filled with tears. He nodded. Can you show me? Billy hesitated, then slowly pulled up his shirt. Derek's vision went red. Billy's back was covered in welts, long, angry red marks that crisscrossed his skin. Some were fresh, livid and swollen. Others were older, fading to yellow and purple. Belt marks. Unmistakable. Jesus Christ, Derek breathed. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone. Billy, I need to take pictures. Is that okay? Billy nodded, tears streaming down his face. Derek photographed the injuries methodically, forcing himself to stay calm, to be clinical. But inside, he was screaming. He documented every mark, every bruise. Then he gently lowered Billy's shirt and pulled him into a hug. You're so brave, he murmured. So brave. I'm going to fix this, buddy. I promise. He said. Billy's voice broke. He said if I told anyone, he'd do worse. He said he'd hurt Mom too, and that you wouldn't come back anyway because you didn't care. That's a lie, Derek said fiercely. None of this is your fault, and I will always come back for you. Always. But Mom, she doesn't believe me. I tried to tell her, but she said I was lying. That I was trying to get attention because you left. Derek's jaw clenched. Shelby knew. Or at least, she'd had the chance to know and chosen not to believe. That made her complicit. Pack a bag, he said suddenly. Just essentials. Clothes, toothbrush, whatever you need. What? Because you're not staying here another night. But the custody. I don't care about custody agreements. Not when you're being hurt. Derek stood up. Pack. Now. We're leaving before Malcolm gets back. Billy didn't argue. He moved quickly, grabbing a backpack and stuffing clothes into it. Derek helped him, his mind already racing ahead. This would be kidnapping in the eyes of the law. But he didn't care. Billy's safety was all that mattered. They were heading for the stairs when they heard it, the rumble of an engine in the driveway. Derek's blood turned to ice. He moved to the window and looked out. Malcolm's Charger was back, parked behind Derek's truck, blocking it in. Malcolm climbed out, and even from a distance, Derek could see the rage on his face. He'd seen the truck. He knew Derek was inside. "Stay here," Derek told Billy. "Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you." "Dad, stay here." Derek descended the stairs as the front door exploded open. Malcolm stood in the doorway, his face twisted with fury. "You've got some balls, breaking into my house," Malcolm snarled. "This isn't your house," Derek said calmly, positioning himself at the base of the stairs, blocking the path to Billy. "And I know what you've been doing." "Yeah? What's that?" "You've been beating my son with a belt buckle. I've seen the marks. I've got photos. And you're done." Malcolm's eyes narrowed. "You don't know what you're talking about. Billy's a liar. A manipulative little." "Choose your next words very carefully," Derek interrupted, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Malcolm laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "What are you going to do? You can't touch me. You lay one finger on me, and I'll have you arrested. You're already breaking about 5 laws just being here." "Worth it." Malcolm took a step forward. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're pathetic. Shelby told me all about you. How you were never there. How you put the army before your family. You abandoned them. This is your fault as much as anyone's." Derek felt something inside him go cold and quiet. The same feeling he'd had in combat, when the chaos fell away and everything became crystal clear. He'd spent months learning to fight like a soldier, but before that, he'd grown up in a rough neighborhood where you learned to handle yourself or you didn't survive. And right now, every lesson from both worlds was screaming at him to end this threat. But not yet. Not until Billy was safe. "I'm taking my son," Derek said evenly. "You're going to step aside and let us leave. And then you're going to wait for the police, who are already on their way." Malcolm's eyes widened slightly. "You're bluffing. Try me." For a moment, they stood there, 2 men locked in a silent battle of wills. Then Malcolm moved, fast, lunging forward with a wild haymaker aimed at Derek's head. Big mistake. Derek had been expecting it. He sidestepped smoothly, caught Malcolm's extended arm, and used the man's own momentum to drive him face first into the wall. Malcolm's nose crunched against the drywall with a satisfying crack. Malcolm roared and spun, blood streaming from his nose. He charged again, and this time Derek didn't hold back. He delivered a precise strike to Malcolm's solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. Malcolm doubled over, gasping. "Stay down," Derek said. But Malcolm was too enraged, or too stupid. He grabbed a lamp from the side table and swung it like a club. Derek caught his wrist, twisted, and heard something pop. Malcolm screamed and dropped the lamp. Derek swept Malcolm's legs out from under him, putting him on the floor. Then he knelt on his back, pinning him down with one knee between his shoulder blades. "You beat a 7-year-old child," Derek said quietly, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You terrorized him. You threatened him. And you thought you'd get away with it." Malcolm struggled weakly. "Get off me." "No. See, here's what's going to happen. The police are coming. You're going to be arrested. And I've got photos of what you did to Billy, evidence that's already been sent to people who will make sure it doesn't disappear. You're done, Malcolm. Your life as you know it is over." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. "And if by some miracle you get out," Derek continued, leaning down so his mouth was close to Malcolm's ear. "If the system fails and you walk free, I want you to remember this moment. Because I will find you. And what I do to you will make you wish you'd never laid eyes on my family." The sirens were right outside now. Car doors slamming. Footsteps on the porch. "Derek, it's Clarence. Stand down." Derek stood slowly, raising his hands. Clarence Jimenez entered with 2 other deputies, weapons drawn but pointed down. "He attacked me." Malcolm gasped, struggling to sit up. "Arrest him. He broke into my house and attacked me." "Funny," Clarence said, looking at Derek. "Because I got a 911 call about 20 minutes ago. Anonymous tip about a domestic disturbance. Gave us probable cause to enter the premises." He looked at Malcolm. "And what do you know? We arrived to find you assaulting Mr. Holden." He glanced at one of the other deputies. "You see that, Martinez?" Deputy Martinez nodded solemnly. Clear case of assault. We got here just in time. Malcolm's face paled. That's bullshit. You can't. Shut up, Clarence said flatly. He looked at Derek. Where's Billy? Upstairs. Safe. Martinez, go check on the kid. See if he needs medical attention. As Deputy Martinez headed upstairs, Clarence handcuffed Malcolm and read him his rights. Malcolm's protests devolved into threats and curses, but Clarence ignored them all. Martinez returned a few minutes later with Billy. The boy ran to Derek and clung to him. Martinez's face was grim. Kid's got marks all over his back and legs, consistent with belt strikes. Some of them look a few days old. Others are recent. Clarence's expression hardened. Malcolm Parsons, you're under arrest for felony child abuse and assault. He looked at the other deputies. Get him out of here. As they dragged Malcolm out, still shouting, still threatening, Derek held Billy close. It's over, he whispered. You're safe now. I've got you. Billy sobbed into his father's chest, and Derek felt his own eyes burning. But these were tears of relief. A fury still burning white-hot beneath his skin. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Chapter 4. The System's Cracks. The next 72 hours were a blur of police interviews, medical examinations, and emergency custody hearings. Derek barely slept, surviving on coffee and adrenaline, refusing to let Billy out of his sight for more than a few minutes. Billy was examined by Dr. Miriam Mead, a pediatrician who specialized in abuse cases. Her report was damning. Multiple contusions consistent with repeated strikes from a belt buckle, some scarring from older injuries, signs of psychological trauma. She recommended immediate removal from the home and therapy. Child Protective Services got involved. Derek sat across from a caseworker named Christy Wall, a tired woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Mr. Holden, she said, reviewing her notes. I'm going to be frank with you. Your son's injuries are severe. The pattern suggests long-term, systematic abuse. The good news is that Malcolm Parsons is in custody. The bad news. She hesitated. What? Derek demanded. The bad news is that Shelby Forbes is still Billy's primary custodial parent. And unless we can prove she was complicit in the abuse or negligent in protecting Billy, the state's position is that he should eventually be returned to her care, with strict supervision, of course. She knew, Derek said flatly. Billy told her. She didn't believe him. Can you prove that? Derek opened his mouth, then closed it. Billy had told him that Shelby dismissed his complaints. But that was hearsay. Without evidence, a recording, a witness, something concrete, it was Billy's word against hers. I can testify, Derek said. About what you witnessed personally, yes. But second-hand statements won't hold up in family court. Christy sighed. Look, I believe you. And I'm going to recommend temporary custody be granted to you while we complete our investigation. But this is a process. It takes time. How much time? Weeks. Maybe months. The courts move slowly. Derek's jaw clenched. And what happens to Malcolm? He'll be arraigned on Monday. The DA is pushing for felony child abuse charges. With your photos and the doctor's report, they've got a solid case. But he'll probably make bail. How is that possible? Because he's a first-time offender in this jurisdiction. No prior convictions in Oregon. His lawyer will argue he's not a flight risk. She saw Derek's expression. I know. It's not fair. But that's how the system works. Derek left the CPS office feeling like he'd been punched in the gut. The system that was supposed to protect children was full of holes. Malcolm would walk free within days. Shelby would probably keep custody eventually. And Billy would be trapped in the middle of it all. He couldn't let that happen. That evening, Derek sat in Art's living room with Billy asleep upstairs, researching everything he could find on Malcolm Parsons. The police report from Clarence had been helpful, but it was just the beginning. Derek needed to know everything about this man, his habits, his contacts, his weaknesses. Malcolm's social media was a goldmine. The man was a narcissist who couldn't resist posting about every aspect of his life. Derek scrolled through months of posts. Malcolm at the gym, flexing for the camera. Malcolm at bars, drunk and belligerent. Malcolm with Shelby, his arm around her possessively. There were also posts about his job. Malcolm worked for a construction company called Aguilar and Sons, run by a man named Colin Aguilar. Derek recognized the name. Colin was a prominent local businessman, known for his charitable work and community involvement. Interesting. Derek kept digging. Malcolm's posts also revealed a pattern of behavior. He frequented a particular bar called The Anchor, usually on Friday nights. He had a group of friends, lowlifes, by the look of them, who enabled his worst behavior. And he had a temper that he barely tried to hide online. There were posts mocking people, threatening ex-girlfriends, bragging about fights. One post in particular caught Derek's attention. It was from 4 months ago, just after Malcolm had moved to town. New town, fresh start. Left some problems behind in Idaho. But that's what restraining orders are for, right? LOL. Time to find a new playground. Derek's eyes narrowed. Malcolm had a restraining order against him in Idaho. Clarence's background check had mentioned it, but seeing Malcolm brag about it made Derek's blood boil. There was something else, too. Several of Malcolm's posts referenced side gigs and making extra cash. Vague hints at illegal activity. Nothing concrete, but enough to make Derek suspicious. He pulled up Colin Aguilar's business profile. Aguilar and Sons had government contracts, worked on public projects. They had to maintain a clean image. If Colin knew about Malcolm's criminal history, or worse, if Malcolm was involved in something illegal through the company, that could be leverage. Derek heard footsteps on the stairs. Art appeared, holding 2 beers. You look like you're planning a war. Something like that, Derek admitted. Art sat down, handing him a beer. Talk to me. Malcolm's going to make bail. He'll be back on the streets by Tuesday, probably. And then what? Then he'll come after me. Or Billy. Or both. Derek took a long pull from the beer. I need to be ready. Ready how? Derek was silent for a moment. Then he said, You remember Tony Donnelly? Art frowned. Donnelly? Yeah, I remember him. Ran with the West Side crew back in high school. Did some time for assault, got out a few years ago. What? He's still around? Last I heard, he runs a gym downtown. Trains fighters, mostly. Art's frown deepened. Derek, what are you thinking? I'm thinking I need information Malcolm's friends won't give to a cop. I need to know what he's into, who he's connected to, and what he's capable of. Derek met his brother's eyes. And I need to make sure that when this goes south, and it will, I'm prepared. You're talking about going outside the law. I'm talking about protecting my son. Art was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed and pulled out his phone. I'll reach out to Donnelly. See if he'll talk to you. The next day, Derek met Tony Donnelly at an old boxing gym on the east side of town. The place smelled like sweat and leather, the walls plastered with fight posters and photos of past champions. Donnelly was in the ring, working mitts with a young fighter, calling out combinations, pushing the kid to his limits. When he saw Derek, he paused, said something to the fighter, and climbed out of the ring. Tony Donnelly was in his late 30s, lean and dangerous looking, with scar tissue over his eyes and knuckles that had seen too many fights. He wiped his face with a towel and regarded Derek with sharp, assessing eyes. Derek Holden, he said. Been a while. Tony, your brother said you needed to talk. Said it was about your kid. Derek nodded. Someone hurt him. Guy named Malcolm Parsons. He's got a record, domestic violence, assault. He's dangerous. And you want what? Information? Muscle. Information first. I need to know what Parsons is into. Who his friends are. What kind of trouble he's carrying. Tony studied him. Why not let the cops handle it? Because the cops are going to let him walk. And I'm not willing to risk Billy's safety on the hope that the system works. Tony grinned. A hard, feral thing. Now that I can respect. He gestured toward his office. Come on. Let's talk. In the cramped office, Tony leaned back in his chair and lit a cigarette. Malcolm Parsons. Yeah, I know him. He comes around sometimes, tries to act tough. Talks a lot of shit. Got into a fight with one of my guys a few months back. Cheap shot him with a bottle. What else? Word is, he's into some shady stuff. Deals a little on the side. Nothing major, just enough to make extra cash. Hangs out at the Anchor on Friday nights with a crew of losers. There's a guy, Daryl Moses, who's his main buddy. They get drunk, start trouble, harass women. Tony took a drag. Moses has a record too. Breaking and entering. Assault. Real winner. Anyone else? Malcolm's got a connection to someone higher up. Don't know who, but I've heard rumors. Someone with money. Someone who keeps him out of trouble when things get hot. Tony leaned forward. You want my advice? Whatever you're planning, be smart. Guys like Parsons? They're cowards. They fold under real pressure. But if he's connected, that complicates things. Derek absorbed this. You said he comes around sometimes. When's the next time? Friday. He's got a standing appointment at the Anchor. Never misses it. What about Moses? Where can I find him? Tony smirked. You planning on having a conversation? Something like that. Tony wrote down an address on a scrap of paper and handed it over. Moses lives in a trailer park off Route 22. Works nights at a warehouse. You didn't hear it from me. Derek stood and extended his hand. I owe you. Damn right you do. Tony shook his hand. And Derek? Whatever you do, don't leave loose ends. Guys like Parsons? If you don't finish them, they come back meaner. Chapter 5, Pressure Points. That night, Derek visited Daryl Moses. The trailer park was a depressing sprawl of rust and neglect. Moses's trailer was near the back, identifiable by the motorcycle parked outside and the Confederate flag tacked over the window. Subtle. Derek waited until after midnight, when Moses's shift at the warehouse would be over. He watched the man pull up on his bike, drunk and weaving, and stumble toward his trailer. Derek intercepted him at the door. Daryl Moses? Moses spun around, startled. He was a big guy, maybe 6 foot, over 200 pounds, but soft, the kind of big that came from beer and bad decisions. His eyes were bloodshot, his face flushed. Who the hell are you? A friend of Malcolm Parsons. Moses relaxed slightly. Yeah? Malcolm didn't mention nothing about. Derek moved fast, grabbing Moses by the shirt and slamming him against the trailer wall. The sound echoed through the park. What the? Moses started, but Derek cut him off. I lied, Derek said quietly. I'm not Malcolm's friend. I'm the father of the child he beat half to death. And you're going to tell me everything you know about him. Moses's eyes went wide with fear. I don't know nothing, man. I just drink with the guy sometimes. Not good enough. Derek tightened his grip. Malcolm's connected to someone. Someone with money. Who is it? I don't. Derek pulled him forward and slammed him against the wall again, harder this time. Try again. Okay. Moses gasped. It's Colin. Colin Aguilar. He's Malcolm's boss at the construction company. But it's more than that. They've got something going on the side. What kind of something? I don't know the details. I swear. But Malcolm brags about it sometimes when he's drunk. Says Colin's got him moving stuff. Supplies or something. Off the books. Says it's easy money. Derek's mind raced. Aguilar and Sons had government contracts. If they were involved in fraud, stealing materials, billing for work not done, that was a federal crime. And if Malcolm was part of it, that made him vulnerable. Where do they meet? Colin's got a warehouse. Out on Industrial Drive. Malcolm goes there sometimes after hours. What else? Does Malcolm have anything on Colin? Leverage. Moses hesitated, and Derek tightened his grip again. Photos. Moses blurted. Malcolm's got photos on his phone. Insurance, he calls it. In case Colin tries to screw him over. What kind of photos? I don't know. He wouldn't show me. But he said if anything ever happens to him, those photos go to the cops. Automatic. Derek released Moses, who sagged against the trailer, breathing hard. If you warn Malcolm I was here, I'll come back. And next time, I won't be asking questions. Moses nodded frantically. I won't say nothing. I swear. Derek walked away, his mind already working through the implications. Malcolm had leverage on Colin Aguilar, which meant Colin had a reason to want Malcolm silenced. And if Derek could get those photos, he'd have leverage on both of them. But first, he needed to know more about Colin. The next day, Derek paid a visit to Leanne Strickland, a reporter for the local paper. He'd met her years ago through a mutual friend, and he knew she had a reputation for digging into corruption. They met at a coffee shop downtown. Leanne was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and skeptical, with a recorder on the table between them. So, she said, stirring her coffee, Art tells me you're looking into Colin Aguilar. That's right. What do you know about him? On the surface? Pillar of the community. Runs a successful business. Donates to charity. Coaches Little League. She paused. But I've been hearing rumors for years. Nothing I can prove, but enough to make me suspicious. What kind of rumors? That Aguilar and Sons inflates costs on government contracts. That they use substandard materials and pocket the difference. That Colin's got connections to city officials who look the other way. She leaned forward. A few years ago, a foreman named Wendell Harrison tried to blow the whistle. Said they were cutting corners on a school renovation, using cheap materials. 2 weeks later, Harrison's house burned down. Ruled accidental. But he left town and never came back. Derek's jaw tightened. You think Colin was behind it? I think Colin's very good at making problems disappear. and I think anyone who crosses him ends up regretting it. She studied Derek. Why are you asking about him? Because I think he's connected to the man who hurt my son, and I think there's a way to take them both down. Leanne's eyes gleamed. If you get me proof, real, solid proof, I'll run the story. But Derek, be careful. Colin Aguilar has deep pockets and a long reach. If he finds out you're digging into him, he won't hesitate to bury you. Derek nodded. I'll keep that in mind. That evening, Derek sat in his truck across the street from the anchor, watching the door. It was Friday night, and according to Tony Donnelly, Malcolm would be here. Sure enough, at 8:47 p.m., Malcolm's Charger pulled into the parking lot. Malcolm climbed out, moving stiffly. His wrist was in a brace from the fight at the house, and his nose was still swollen. He was flanked by Daryl Moses and another man Derek didn't recognize. They disappeared into the bar. Derek waited an hour, letting them get drunk, letting their guard down. Then he made his move. Inside, the anchor was a dive. Dim lighting, sticky floors, the smell of stale beer and cigarettes. Malcolm and his crew were at a table in the back, laughing too loud, making a scene. Derek walked straight to the bar and ordered a beer. He positioned himself so he could see Malcolm in the mirror behind the bottles. It didn't take long for Malcolm to notice him. Derek saw the recognition flicker across Malcolm's face, followed by rage. Malcolm stood abruptly, knocking his chair back, and stormed toward the bar. You've got some nerve showing your face here, Malcolm snarled. Derek turned slowly, beer in hand. It's a free country. You're going to jail, you know that? Assault, breaking, and entering. The DA's going to throw the book at you. Funny, I heard the DA's more interested in child abusers. Derek took a sip of his beer. How's the wrist? Malcolm's face turned red. You think you're tough? You think you're some kind of hero? I think I'm a father who protects his son. Your son's a liar. A manipulative little. Derek moved before Malcolm could finish the sentence. He set his beer down, grabbed Malcolm by the collar, and slammed him against the bar. The entire bar went silent. Say one more word about my son, Derek said, his voice deadly calm, and I will end you. Right here. Right now. Moses and the other guy jumped up, but Derek didn't let go. He stared into Malcolm's eyes, saw the fear there beneath the bravado. You're done, Malcolm, Derek continued. Your life as you know it is over. The cops have the evidence. Your boss knows you're a liability, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what you are. He released Malcolm, who stumbled back, breathing hard. This isn't over, Malcolm spat. No, Derek agreed. It's not. He walked out of the bar, feeling the weight of a dozen eyes on his back. Behind him, he heard Malcolm shouting, cursing, making threats. Good. Let him. Angry people made mistakes. Chapter 6. The Noose Tightens. Malcolm's arraignment happened on Monday, and it went exactly as Christy Wall had predicted. The judge set bail at $50,000. Malcolm's lawyer, a slick, expensive type who oozed false sincerity, argued that his client was a productive member of society, employed by a reputable company, with strong ties to the community. The DA countered with photos of Billy's injuries, Dr. Mead's report, and Derek's testimony. The judge looked troubled but unmoved. Bail was granted. Malcolm walked out of the courthouse smirking, flanked by his lawyer and Colin Aguilar himself. Derek watched from across the street, his hands clenched into fists. Colin Aguilar was in his 50s, tall and distinguished-looking, with silver hair and expensive clothes. He put a hand on Malcolm's shoulder, a gesture that looked supportive but felt proprietary. The two men exchanged words, then climbed into Colin's Mercedes and drove away. Derek followed at a distance. They drove to the warehouse on Industrial Drive that Moses had mentioned. It was a nondescript building surrounded by a chain-link fence, the kind of place that wouldn't attract attention. Colin and Malcolm disappeared inside. Derek parked half a block away and waited. 20 minutes later, Malcolm emerged alone, carrying a duffel bag. He tossed it into his Charger and drove off. Derek didn't follow. Instead, he waited until Colin left, then approached the warehouse. The front gate was locked, but the fence was climbable. Derek scaled it easily and dropped into the yard. The warehouse had a few windows, but they were high and barred. He circled the building, looking for a way in. At the back, he found a service door. Locked but old. Derek pulled a slim tool kit from his pocket, a leftover from his time in the military, and worked the lock. 30 seconds later, the door clicked open. Inside, the warehouse was dark and cavernous. Rows of shelving held construction materials, lumber, piping, electrical supplies. Everything looked legitimate. Derek moved deeper into the space, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. At the back, he found an office with a glass window overlooking the warehouse floor. The door was unlocked. Inside, the office was surprisingly neat. A desk with a computer, file cabinets, a safe in the corner. Derek tried the computer, password protected. The file cabinets were locked. The safe was another matter. It was a cheap model, the kind you could buy at a hardware store. Derek knelt in front of it, listening to the tumblers as he turned the dial. It took him 3 tries, but he got it open. Inside, he found cash, maybe $10,000 in neat stacks. Beneath that, a ledger. And beneath that, a phone. Derek pulled out the phone and powered it on. It was an older model, a burner. The only contacts were labeled with initials, CP, DR, and M. He opened the photo gallery. There were dozens of photos. Some showed pallets of materials being loaded into unmarked trucks. Others showed invoices, government contracts with inflated costs, side by side with the actual receipts for cheaper materials. The difference between what the government paid and what Colin spent was staggering. There were also photos of Malcolm and Colin together, meeting with men Derek didn't recognize. And one photo in particular made Derek's blood run cold. Malcolm standing next to a city official, a man Derek recognized as Councilman Wallace Jacobs. The 3 of them were shaking hands, smiling for the camera. This was more than just fraud. This was a conspiracy. Derek used his own phone to photograph every image on the burner, then returned it to the safe. He pocketed the ledger and the cash, evidence, and also insurance. As he was leaving, he heard voices outside. Footsteps approaching the back door. Derek moved quickly, slipping back into the shadows of the warehouse. The door opened, and Colin Aguilar entered with another man, older, wearing a suit. Councilman Jacobs. Can't afford any more heat, Jacobs was saying. The DA's already sniffing around. Malcolm's a problem, Colin agreed. He's unstable, drawing attention. Then handle it. I intend to. But quietly. We can't have another Wendell Harrison situation. Jacobs stopped walking. You said that was an accident. It was. Mostly. Colin's voice was cold. Look, Malcolm knows too much. He's got evidence. If he goes down, he could take us with him. So what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we make him disappear before that happens. Derek's blood ran cold. They were planning to kill Malcolm. He should have felt nothing. Malcolm was a monster who'd hurt his son. But hearing 2 men casually discuss murder made Derek's skin crawl. This was bigger than he'd thought. The 2 men continued talking, but Derek didn't wait to hear more. He slipped out the back door and disappeared into the night. Back at Art's house, Derek spread the evidence across the kitchen table. The photos, the ledger, the cash. Jesus, Art breathed, looking at the images. This is big, Derek. Like, federal investigation big. I know. Derek ran a hand through his hair. Colin and Jacobs are planning to kill Malcolm. I heard them talking about it. So, let them. Malcolm deserves whatever he gets. Maybe. But if Colin kills Malcolm, all of this disappears. Malcolm's the only one who can tie Colin directly to the fraud. Without him, Colin walks. Art frowned. What are you saying? I'm saying I need Malcolm alive long enough to testify against Colin. And then, Derek's eyes went hard. Then he can rot. How are you going to pull that off? Derek thought for a moment. Then he pulled out his phone and called Clarence Jimenez. Clarence, it's Derek. I need to meet. Tonight. And bring the DA. 2 hours later, Derek sat in a conference room at the police station with Clarence, District Attorney Miriam Meade, and FBI Special Agent Arnold Henson. Henson was a stern, no-nonsense man in his 50s who listened without interrupting as Derek laid out everything he'd found. When he finished, Henson leaned back in his chair. This is a serious accusation. You're saying Colin Aguilar is running a fraud scheme, bribing city officials, and planning to murder Malcolm Parsons. That's exactly what I'm saying. And I've got proof. Derek slid the photos and ledger across the table. Henson reviewed them carefully, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, this is enough to open an investigation. But I'll need more. I'll need testimony from Parsons. Malcolm's not going to talk, DA Meade said. He's facing felony charges. Why would he cooperate? Because if he doesn't, Colin's going to kill him, Derek said bluntly. And if you offer him a deal, reduce charges in exchange for testimony against Colin and Jacobs, he'll take it. Henson nodded slowly. It could work, but we need to move fast. If Aguilar suspects we're onto him, he'll destroy the evidence. Then we move tonight, Derek said. Chapter 7. The Trap. The plan was simple, but dangerous. Derek would wear a wire and confront Malcolm, getting him to admit to the fraud and to Colin's plans. Once they had Malcolm's confession on tape, the FBI would move in and offer him a deal. Then they'd use Malcolm to set up Colin and Jacobs. Simple. Except that nothing about this was simple. Derek stood in the parking lot of the Anchor, the wire taped to his chest, a federal agent in an unmarked van 2 blocks away. It was Friday night again, and Malcolm was inside with his crew. Derek walked in. The bar was crowded tonight, loud and raucous. Malcolm was at his usual table, drunk and belligerent. When he saw Derek, his face twisted with rage. "You've got balls showing up here," Malcolm slurred, standing up. "We need to talk," Derek said calmly. "Alone. I've got nothing to say to you. Not even about Colin Aguilar." Malcolm froze. "What about him? Let's take this outside." Malcolm hesitated, then nodded. He followed Derek out into the parking lot. Moses started to follow, but Derek held up a hand. "Just Malcolm. This is between him and me." Outside, the cool night air was sobering. Malcolm leaned against his car, arms crossed defensively. "What do you want?" "I know about the fraud," Derek said bluntly. "The materials you've been moving. The fake invoices. The kickbacks to Jacobs." Malcolm's eyes widened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. And so does Colin. That's why he's planning to kill you." "You're insane." "Am I? Why do you think you're still walking around free?" "Colin paid your bail, didn't he? Got you a fancy lawyer. He's keeping you close so he can control you. But the minute you become too much of a liability, you're done." Malcolm's bravado cracked. "Colin wouldn't. Colin already killed Wendell Harrison. Or did you forget about that?" Malcolm's face went pale. "That was an accident. Was it? Or was it a warning?" Derek took a step closer. "You're in over your head, Malcolm. Colin's using you. And when the feds come knocking, and they will, you're the one who'll take the fall." "I've got insurance," Malcolm said quickly. "Photos. Evidence. If anything happens to me, it all goes to the cops." "You mean the burner phone in Colin's safe? The one you think is still there?" Derek saw the fear flash across Malcolm's face. "Yeah. I've already been to the warehouse. I've seen the photos. And I've given copies to the FBI." Malcolm's knees buckled. He grabbed the hood of his car to steady himself. You can't." "I can. And I did. Right now, federal agents are preparing to arrest Colin Aguilar and Wallace Jacobs. And you're going to help them." "I'm not helping you with anything." "Then you'll go to prison for fraud, conspiracy, and felony child abuse. You'll spend the next 20 years in a federal penitentiary." Derek's voice turned cold. "Or you can cooperate. Testify against Colin and Jacobs. In exchange, the DA will reduce your charges. You'll still do time for what you did to Billy, but it'll be a fraction of what you're facing now." Malcolm stared at him, wide-eyed. "Why would you do this? Why would you help me?" "I'm not helping you. I'm destroying Colin Aguilar. You're just a tool to get there." Derek leaned in close. "But understand this. If you don't take the deal, you're a dead man. Colin's already planning it. And I'll make sure the feds know you refuse to cooperate. Then everyone loses, except Colin." Malcolm was silent for a long moment. Then he whispered, "What do you want me to do?" In the unmarked van, FBI agent Arnold Henson listened to the entire conversation. When Malcolm agreed to cooperate, Henson nodded to his team. "We've got him. Move in." Chapter 8. The Reckoning. 2 days later, federal agents raided Colin Aguilar's home and business. They seized computers, financial records, and the contents of the warehouse safe. Colin was arrested on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. Wallace Jacobs was arrested the same day. Malcolm Parsons, true to his word, testified before a grand jury. He detailed the fraud scheme, the bribes, the fake invoices. He admitted to his own role and implicated Colin and Jacobs completely. In exchange, the DA dropped the felony child abuse charge to aggravated assault. Malcolm would serve 5 years in state prison, a pittance compared to what he deserved, but enough to satisfy Derek's immediate need for justice. The trial of Colin Aguilar and Wallace Jacobs was a media sensation. Leanne Strickland broke the story in the local paper, and it was picked up by state and national outlets. The scale of the fraud was staggering. Millions of dollars stolen from taxpayers, funneled into the pockets of corrupt officials. Colin's defense tried to paint Malcolm as a disgruntled employee, a liar looking for a deal. But the evidence was overwhelming. The photos, the ledger, the testimony of former employees who'd been too scared to speak up before. On the witness stand, Derek testified about finding the burner phone, about overhearing Colin and Jacobs discussing Malcolm's murder. His credibility as a decorated combat veteran lent weight to his words. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Colin Aguilar and Wallace Jacobs were found guilty on all counts. Colin was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Jacobs got 15. Derek sat in the courtroom as the verdicts were read, feeling a grim satisfaction. It wasn't perfect. Malcolm had gotten off too easy, but Colin and Jacobs were done. Their empire was destroyed, and Billy was safe. The custody hearing happened 2 weeks after the trial concluded. Shelby sat across the courtroom from Derek, looking small and defeated. She'd lost her job when the scandal broke. Her association with Malcolm had destroyed her reputation, and now she was fighting to keep custody of a son she'd failed to protect. The judge reviewed the evidence: Billy's injuries, Dr. Meade's report, the testimony of Billy himself, recorded in a private session with a child psychologist. Billy had been clear. Malcolm had hurt him repeatedly. He'd told his mother, and she hadn't believed him. Shelby's lawyer tried to argue that she'd been manipulated, that Malcolm had fooled her, that she was a victim too. But the judge wasn't swayed. "Ms. Forbes," the judge said, her voice stern, "your son came to you for help, and you dismissed him. Whether out of negligence or willful blindness, you failed in your most fundamental duty as a parent. I cannot in good conscience return Billy to your care." Shelby broke down crying. The judge granted Derek full custody. Shelby would have supervised visitation rights, contingent on completing parenting classes and therapy. Derek felt no satisfaction in her tears. He'd once loved Shelby. They'd built a life together. But she'd made her choices, and now she had to live with them. After the hearing, Derek found Billy waiting outside the courtroom with Art and Dr. Meade. Billy looked nervous, his small hands twisting together. "Hey, buddy," Derek said, kneeling down. "It's over. You're coming home with me." Billy's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were tears of relief. He threw his arms around Derek's neck. "I get to stay with you?" "Yeah, forever." Billy sobbed into his father's shoulder, and Derek held him tight, feeling his own eyes burn. They'd been through hell, but they'd made it out the other side. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 6 months later, Derek and Billy had settled into a new routine. They'd moved into a small house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. Billy had started at a new school, and with Dr. Meade's help, he was slowly healing. The nightmares were less frequent. The flinching had mostly stopped. He smiled more. Derek had taken a job as a medic with the local fire department. The hours were long, but he was home every night. He coached Billy's soccer team. They had dinner together every evening. They were building a life, a real one this time, not the fractured, broken thing he'd left behind when he deployed. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Billy said quietly, "Dad." "Yeah, buddy. Do you think Mom will ever be okay?" Derek considered the question. Shelby had been attending her court-mandated classes. She'd started therapy. The last time she'd visited Billy, under supervision, she'd apologized. It had been awkward and painful, but it was a start. "I think she's trying," Derek said honestly. "People make mistakes, Billy. Big ones. But they can also change if they really want to. Do you forgive her?" Derek sighed. "I don't know yet, but I'm not angry anymore. And maybe that's enough for now." Billy nodded, processing this. Then he said, "I'm glad you came back." "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn orange and pink. Derek thought about everything they'd been through. The fear, the pain, the fight for justice. It had nearly destroyed them both. But they'd survived, and that was worth something. A few weeks later, Derek received a letter in the mail. It was from Malcolm Parsons, postmarked from the state penitentiary. Derek almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity got the better of him. "Holden, I'm not writing this to apologize. I don't expect you to forgive me. What I did to your kid was unforgivable. I know that. But I wanted you to know something. Being in here, away from the booze and the anger and the people who made me think I was something I'm not, it's given me time to think. About the kind of man I became. About the things I did. Colin used me. He made me feel powerful, like I mattered. But I was just a tool. And when I wasn't useful anymore, He tried to throw me away. You beat him. You beat all of them. And you did it to protect your son. I respect that. I'll never be that kind of man. I know that now. But maybe, in here, I can figure out how not to be a monster. I hope your kid heals. He deserves better than what I gave him. Malcolm. Derek read the letter twice, then folded it and tucked it into a drawer. He didn't feel anger anymore. He didn't feel satisfaction either. He felt nothing. Malcolm Parsons was no longer a threat. He was just a cautionary tale, a broken man paying for his crimes. And that was enough. Later that evening, Billy came running into the living room, excited. Dad, Coach says I can play forward in the next game. Derek grinned. That's great, buddy. You've been working hard. Will you come watch? Wouldn't miss it. Billy beamed, and in that moment, Derek felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The fight was over. The monsters were defeated. And he and Billy had a future ahead of them. One built on trust, on love, on the kind of strength that comes from surviving the worst and choosing to keep going. Derek pulled his son into a hug. I'm proud of you, Billy. I'm proud of you too, Dad. And for the first time in a long time, Derek Holden believed things were going to be okay. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.